She was promised to an alpha she didn't love, but the scarred alpha who watched from the shadows, he felt the mate bond snap into place the moment their eyes met. The great hall of Silvercrest Keep was dressed for celebration, but Celine could barely breathe in it. Garlands of wintergreen pine were woven along the stone pillars, dusted with frost and tiny lanterns. Beeswax candles burned in iron sconces, filling the air with warm honey and smoke. Wolves moved through the space in their human forms, laughter rising and falling like a tide. Tankards clinked, boots thudded, music drifted from a corner where a few warriors tried to wrestle a tune from fiddle and drum. It should have felt like a feast day. It felt like a trap. Celine stood near the far wall, fingers curled around the cool stone window ledge. Outside, the courtyard lay under a thin crust of snow, the sky beyond it clear and sharp. She focused on the cold biting through the glass, on the way it seeped into her fingertips, trying to ground herself. Her wolf pressed, restless and anxious under her skin. "Not yet," she whispered inward. "Not now." Her reflection in the leaded glass looked steady enough. A young woman with dark hair braided and pinned, wrapped in deep blue that matched Silvercrest colors. A thin silver chain lay against the base of her throat, the familiar weight of the small crescent moon pendant her mother had given her before she died. Celine. Her father's voice found her through the crowd, low and commanding. Alpha Thorn moved toward her, tall and broad-shouldered, his graying hair pulled back, his jaw tight in a way that told her everything she needed to know about tonight. He only looked like that when he was about to do something he hated but would not back away from. She straightened, spine stiffening as if pulled up by an invisible leash. "Yes, father." His scent, pine, old leather, and the faint copper of battle wrapped around her as he stopped at her side. It had always been a comfort, but tonight there was strain in it, sharpened by worry. He didn't rest a hand on her shoulder as he sometimes did. He kept his arms at his sides, hands clenched. "The envoys from Thornridge have arrived," he said quietly. "Alpha Ronan is here." The name landed like a stone in her stomach. "We spoke of options," she said, trying to keep her voice calm, smooth. "We spoke of time." His jaw flexed. "We are out of time." Celine stared up at him. There must be another way to secure the border. To replenish the winter stores. Thornridge controls the trade routes, he cut in, voice low but unyielding. "Ronan has the supply lines we need. He has the warriors to hold off Blackclaw if they press south again. You know this." She did. She had spent nights in her father's study, poring over maps, breathing in the heavy scent of ink, parchment, and his fatigue. She knew how many mouths needed feeding, how many warriors they could afford to lose. But knowing never made this easier. "You didn't say yes," she whispered. "You said you were considering." Her father's gaze flicked to the high dais at the far end of the room, where an extra chair had been placed beside his own. It gleamed with fresh polish under the firelight. "The decision is made," he said. "For the pack. For you." "For me?" Her laugh came out soft and incredulous. "You know he's not my mate." "We don't always get the luxury of a mate bond," he said, the words heavy. "Your mother and I loved each other deeply. We were never bound by the moon." Celine's throat tightened. "But you promised me I'd never be forced, that I'd have a choice." His eyes closed for a heartbeat. When they opened, they were the eyes of an alpha, not a father. Steady, resolved. "I promised that when things were different." His voice was rough. "They aren't different anymore." He lifted his hand then, not to comfort, but to offer. In his palm lay a silver ring, its band thick and cold-looking, set with a dark green stone that caught the torchlight in glints. Her wolf recoiled. Celine felt it like a physical flinch under her skin, fur bristling, a low, instinctive growl curling through her chest. The ring smelled faintly of metal and someone else's hand. There was no warmth to it, no echo of belonging. Take it, Alpha Thorn said. We will announce the betrothal when Ronan arrives at the dais. You will stand with him. Her fingers wouldn't move. Celine. The name was a command now. She reached out, each inch of the motion slow, as if pushing through water. The metal touched her skin, cold and unforgiving. Her father's calloused fingers brushed the inside of her wrist as he placed the ring in her palm. That familiar roughness of his touch cutting through the numbness for a moment. Look at me, he said. She forced her eyes up. If there were another way, I would take it, he said quietly, for her alone. I would give you the choice I promised, but I cannot bargain with fantasy when my pack may not survive the winter. I ask you to be strong. You ask me to bind myself to a man I don't feel, she said, pain threading the words together. To a bond that doesn't exist. I ask you to protect your people. The hall seemed to close in around them. The smells of roasted meat, spiced wine, and damp wool grew thick in her nose. Laughter from across the room sounded hollow and far away. Celine curled her fingers around the ring, feeling the edges bite into her palm. The tiny pain grounded her. I will stand where you ask me to, she said finally. But I won't lie to myself about what this is. His eyes softened, just for a breath. Then the alpha mask settled back in place. That is all I can ask. He turned away, calling for the herald, the advisors, the pack elders. The room shifted, people moving into position, instinctively aware that something important was about to happen. Celine stayed where she was for one last moment, letting her forehead rest lightly against the cold stone by the window. The chill seeped into her skin, dulled the heat behind her eyes. Her wolf paced, restless, unhappy. The bond thread she had always imagined, a warm, invisible line that would one day tug her toward the one meant for her, remained still and silent. When the trumpet sounded at the great doors, she straightened and turned. The Thornridge wolves entered with practiced confidence, cloaks trimmed in dark fur, armor polished, boots heavy against the stone floor. Their pack scent rolled ahead of them, smoke, iron, and the dry bite of their northern pines. At their head walked Alpha Ronan. He was taller than most of his men, broad through the shoulders, with dark hair cut close at the sides and longer on top. His eyes were a cool gray-green, sharp and assessing as they swept the room. His jaw was clean-shaven, his expression composed, the slight curve of his mouth too controlled to be a true smile. He moved like a man who knew his strength and didn't need to prove it. As he and his escort approached the dais, Celine forced herself to notice details. The faint scar along his left hand, white against tanned skin. The way his cloak shifted with each step, heavy with embroidered thorns. She waited for something else, for a spark, a tug, a rush of warmth or a painful jolt, anything that would hint at a mate bond awakening. Nothing came. When he reached the base of the dais, their gazes met. Ronan's nostrils flared almost imperceptibly as he took in her scent. Wildflowers, clean rain, and the faint undertone of silvercrest evergreen that clung to all her people. His eyes warmed with appreciation, but not shock, not recognition. Alpha Thorn, he said, voice smooth as polished stone. Silvercrest honors us. Thornridge's presence honors us as well, her father answered formally. Ronan's gaze slid back to Celine. And this must be your daughter. Celine dipped her chin. My lord. He stepped closer, closing some of the space between them. The Thornridge pack scent grew stronger, pine, steel, and something like cold river water. It wasn't unpleasant, but it settled around her rather than into her, like a cloak someone else had chosen. Ronan, he said. When we stand as equals, there is no need for titles between us. We are not equals, she thought, pulse ticking at her throat. Not in the way you think. Aloud, she said, Then you may call me Celine. His eyes flicked to her closed hand. You haven't put it on. She realized she was still clutching the ring, her fingers stiff around it. Slowly, she uncurled her hand. The silver caught the firelight, the green stone flashing like a forest locked in ice. Ronan's hand rose between them. His fingers were long, the pads roughened from training and war. When they brushed against hers, a faint spark of sensation shot up her arm, not the electric, all-consuming jolt she had always imagined, but a sharp awareness of contact. His skin was warm, his grip firm as he carefully slid the ring from her palm and held it up. "May I?" he asked, his voice dipping lower, for her alone. Celine looked at the ring, at his hand, at the hall that had gone almost silent, every ear tuned to this moment. Her wolf pressed hard against her ribs, unhappy but powerless to change what was coming. She nodded once. He took her left hand in his and turned it palm up. The calluses on his fingertips scraped lightly across her skin, rough and real. The contrast between the warmth of his touch and the coldness of the metal made her fingers twitch. The ring slid over her knuckle, seating itself at the base of her finger with a final decisive press. It felt heavy. The room exhaled as if it had been holding its breath. Alpha Thorn stepped forward, his voice ringing out through the hall. "Tonight, we celebrate the union between Silvercrest and Thornridge. My daughter, Celine, is pledged to Alpha Ronan that our packs may stand stronger together." Applause rose, rough and loud. Tankards were raised, boots stamped. The smells of ale, meat, sweat, and smoke swirled together, thick in her nose. Ronan's thumb brushed the back of her hand, a small, grounding touch. His scent wrapped closer, edged with satisfaction. "To alliances," he murmured. Celine's mouth felt dry. "To duty," she answered softly. They stood side by side as the hall roared around them. Servants moved through the crowd with platters of food. Roasted boar glistening with fat, loaves of dark bread, bowls of stewed root vegetables. The rich scent of meat turned her stomach. Musicians struck up a louder tune, wolves shifted to make space, couples moving into simple dances. Ronan kept hold of her hand as they stepped down from the dais to mingle with the assembled pack. "You're trembling," he said quietly, his tone more curious than concerned. His thumb traced another small circle across her skin, the friction soft but constant. "Are you afraid of me?" "I don't know you well enough to fear you," she said. "This is a lot of eyes." He huffed a short, amused breath. "You were raised at an alpha's side. You must be used to eyes." "Not like this," she said. "Not for this." He studied her profile for a moment, then leaned in with a conspirator's tilt of his head. The faint brush of his breath warmed the shell of her ear, carrying that pine and steel scent. "If it's any comfort," he said, "my own pack is watching just as closely. Half of them think I should have taken a mate years ago. The other half are still stunned I agreed to a political match at all." "Why did you?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. His hand tightened around hers for a fraction of a second, then eased. "Because my people needed it." The simple answer mirrored her father's earlier words so closely it made her chest ache. Ronan guided her through the crowd, pausing to exchange formal greetings with elders from both packs. Celine smiled where she had to, accepted congratulations, felt hands brush her arms, her shoulders, in friendly contact. Each touch layered scents on the air: lavender from an elder's hair oil, sharp mint from a warrior's breath, smoke and sweat and wine. Everywhere she turned, there were reminders that this wasn't just about her. At one point, her cousin Lena slipped close and squeezed Selena's wrist, fingers warm against her skin. Lena's eyes were wide with worry beneath the braid that circled her head. "Are you all right?" Lena murmured, breath carrying the faint smell of mulled wine and cloves. "I'm standing," Selene said, keeping her gaze ahead. "That's something." Lena's thumb rubbed a small, soothing stroke along the thin inside of her forearm, the familiar touch loosening the tightness in Selene's shoulders for a heartbeat. "If you need to slip away, I'll cover for you." Selene gave the faintest shake of her head. They'd notice. Ronan glanced between them, assessing, then let it go. Later, when the first rush of congratulations had faded and the hall had settled into the steady rhythm of feasting, he led her to a quieter corner near one of the towering hearths. The heat from the fire kissed her cheeks, bringing back feeling to skin that had gone tight and cold. Sparks popped and snapped in the logs. Resin smoked, filling the air with the sharp sweetness of burning pine. Ronan released her hand long enough to accept 2 goblets from a passing servant, then offered one to her. "Drink," he said. "You look like you're bracing for a blow." "I'm adjusting," she replied, fingers closing around the warm metal of the cup. The spiced wine inside smelled of cinnamon and orange peel. She took a small sip and let the heat trail down her throat. Ronan watched her, gaze steady. "You don't hide your feelings well, Celine of Silvercrest." "I was not raised to play games," she said. "Neither was I." They stood in the flicker of the firelight, the noise of the hall dimmer here, but still a constant backdrop. The glow picked up strands of red in his dark hair, made the green in his eyes more pronounced. "Do you resent this match?" he asked. The bluntness caught her off guard. She answered with equal honesty. "I resent having no say in it." His jaw worked once. "Fair." "Do you?" she asked. "Resent it?" He considered, then shook his head. "Resent is the wrong word. I am cautious." "Of me?" "Of tying my pack's fate to anyone," he said. "Even a woman who looks at me with frost and fire at once." Her lips parted. Frost and fire. It sounded almost like something from a story, but his tone stayed level, matter of fact. "I prefer clear truths," he went on. "Here is one. I do not expect you to fall at my feet. I expect you to stand beside me if we are to make this alliance work." "And if I don't?" she asked softly. "Then we will have problems," he said, equally soft, "and our packs will suffer for it." His eyes held hers until the weight of it became too much, and she looked away, focusing instead on the fire. The warmth soaked into her front, but her back still felt chilled by the draft of the stone wall behind her. He shifted closer, not quite brushing against her, but near enough that the heat of his body mingled with the heat of the flames. The faint itch of the new ring on her finger drew her attention again. She twisted it slightly, feeling the cool band press into her skin. "Does it bother you so much?" he asked, noticing. "I'm not used to wearing someone else's claim," she said. "Do you believe that's all this is?" She turned her head toward him. "What else would you call it?" "A contract," he said. "A promise between alphas sealed in flesh instead of ink. Claims can be broken. Contracts have consequences." The word consequences sat between them like a third presence. Celine's wolf shifted, uneasy. Across the hall, the great doors opened again. Cold air knifed in, carrying a flurry of snowflakes and a scent that prickled along Celine's skin. She straightened without meaning to, head turning toward the entrance. The smell cut through the layered aromas of feast and fire, clean storm air, rain on dark earth, and something wild that raised the hair on her arms. Her breath stuttered, caught halfway. Ronan glanced at her, then followed her gaze to the doors as a ripple moved through the crowd. A small group of late arrivals stood framed in the doorway, cloaks dusted with snow, the wind tugging at their edges. At their center walked a man with broad shoulders and dark hair, his posture relaxed, but command woven through every step. The flickering torchlight caught on the wet edge of his cloak, turning droplets into shards of glinting silver. His eyes swept the hall with a lazy kind of alertness, as if he was used to measuring threats with a single glance. Silvercrest Wolves murmured his name. "Kalen of Stormfall," someone nearby said under their breath. "The rogue alpha who refuses alliances." Celine's hand tightened around her cup. The rim bit into her palm, grounding and yet not enough. That scent rolled further into the hall now, drawn by the currents of warm air, storm wind and cedar, and the faint, aching pull of something that reached straight into her chest and curled there. Her wolf went very, very still. Ronan watched her carefully, his own nose flaring as the new scent reached them. A crease formed between his brows, the first crack in his composed mask. "Do you know him?" he asked. "No," she whispered, though her heart had begun to pound, each beat thudding deep and certain against her ribs. "I don't." But as Kalen crossed the threshold fully, as his gaze lifted toward the dais and brushed past them, Celine felt something inside her shift, like a locked door had been nudged from the other side. The ring on her finger suddenly felt heavier than iron. The storm scent wrapped around her senses, uninvited and undeniable. Her wolf lifted its head, ears pricked, a low sound vibrating through her bones. Recognition, startled and fierce. Something deep and instinctive whispered one word she wasn't ready for. Mate. And the bond burning alive in her chest did not belong to the man whose ring weighed down her hand. The hall didn't feel the same after Kalen entered. The music carried on. Laughter rose and fell. Tankards were raised and emptied. But beneath it all, something had shifted, like the pressure before a storm breaks. Celine felt it in her chest. She stood beside Ronan near the hearth, the fire heat still pressed against her front, while cold crept up her spine from the open doors behind her. The ring sat heavy and wrong at the base of her finger. She twisted it once without thinking, then stilled when Ronan's eyes flicked down. "You don't like it," he observed. "It isn't mine," she said. Flat, honest. Ronan followed her gaze across the hall. Kalen had paused just inside the threshold, snow still melting into the dark stone at his boots. He had removed his cloak, revealing a fitted black tunic worn thin in places from use, not display. Broad shoulders, long arms, a body built for movement, not ceremony. He wasn't searching the room. He already knew. Celine felt it when his head turned, when his eyes found her. The bond snapped tight, not painful, but sharp enough to steal her breath. Her lungs stuttered. Heat bloomed under her skin, spreading fast and unwelcome. Her wolf surged forward in response, not yearning, alert, awake. Mate. The truth landed in her body long before her mind could catch up. Her pulse thudded hard and steady, her palms dampened, her senses sharpened until every smell cut clean. Kalen's scent hit her fully now, storm wind, rain-dark earth, and something deeper that anchored instead of overwhelmed. It didn't ask. It claimed nothing. It simply was. Ronan noticed her change immediately. His hand shifted on her back, fingers tightening just slightly, not possessive, assessing. "Something wrong?" he murmured. Before Celine could answer, Kalen started walking. He moved through the hall without hesitation, wolves parting instinctively in his path. Conversations stuttered, then fell quiet. Heads turned. Even the musicians faltered, their rhythm breaking before resuming at a lower volume. Kalen stopped a few paces away. Up close, his eyes were darker than Celine had thought, a deep gray, edged with blue, like a storm caught between breaking and restraint. His gaze moved over her quickly. The ring, her posture, the tension locked into her shoulders. Then it hardened, not at her, at Ronan. "You're bound," Kalen said. No greeting, no courtesy. His voice was low and even, but carried. The words landed like a challenge. Celine's jaw clenched. Ronan straightened slowly, setting his goblet aside. "She is promised," Ronan replied. Calm, controlled. "To me." Kalen's attention flicked back to Celine. His eyes softened for exactly one heartbeat. Not longing, not tenderness. Recognition. A quiet understanding that stole her breath harder than the bond itself. Then he looked away. "I wasn't speaking to her," Kalen said. "I was stating fact." The space between the two alphas went taut. "You arrived late," Ronan said. This is a formal gathering. I arrived when the storm let me through the pass, Kaelin replied, and when a bond called me. A murmur rippled through the hall. Selene felt every eye on her now. Heat flushed her neck. The ring pressed into her skin like accusation. Ronan's voice lowered. There is no bond here. Kaelin didn't smile. He didn't raise his voice. Then you've never stood this close to a true one. Silence fell heavy and thick. Selene swallowed. Her throat felt tight, the air sharp. She forced herself to speak before the moment slipped beyond her. This was not my choice, she said. Kaelin's head turned sharply back to her. Ronan stiffened at her side, but she stepped forward anyway, breaking the clean line between them. The movement sent a jolt through her limbs. Not desire, not fear, release. Like stepping into alignment after being pulled crooked. I did not agree to this promise, she continued, voice steady. I was told to stand. I stood. Kaelin watched her closely now, as if reading something beneath her words. His scent wrapped closer, reacting to her honesty, grounding, steady. Ronan's hand came up, fingers brushing her wrist. The contact felt neutral. Warm skin, no pull, no heat, no recognition, just a touch meant to guide. Kaelin saw it. His jaw tightened. Remove your hand, he said to Ronan. The command rang clear, sharp enough that a few wolves flinched. Ronan did not move. She is under my protection, Ronan said. You do not command me in this hall. I am not commanding, Kaelin said. I am warning. The air crackled. Selene's wolf pushed forward again, restless but not panicked. Ronan exhaled slowly, then removed his hand. Selene didn't look at him. She couldn't afford to soften. Not with him. Not ever. Kaelin shifted his stance slightly, angling his body between her and Ronan without fully blocking her from view. It wasn't intimate. It was defensive. This bond exists whether you acknowledge it or not, Kaelin said. Pack law doesn't erase it, ceremony doesn't bind over it, and no alpha has the right to force her into a false claim. False, Ronan repeated coolly. This alliance will save lives. And destroy her, Kaelin said. You can't rip something sacred out by the roots and expect the land to stay whole. Alphathorn's voice cut through the tension. Enough. Selene's father stepped down from the dais, his face carved into calm authority, though his scent betrayed strain. Old pine and iron threaded with worry. You will not challenge this here, Alphathorn said to Kaelin. This is my hall. Kaelin inclined his head slightly. Respect, but no retreat. Then we will challenge it by law, he said. The words landed like thunder. Selene turned sharply toward him. Challenge? Kaelin looked at her, really looked. I will not let this stand, he said quietly. Not while you're being forced to wear another's claim. Her chest tightened. I didn't choose you. I know, he said at once. His voice didn't soften, but it didn't press either. The bond doesn't erase choice. That, not the bond itself, steadied her. But the bond doesn't belong to them either, he continued, gaze lifting to Ronan, then Thorn. So we do this the old way. A low murmur filled the hall. By trial, someone whispered. By challenge, another breathed. Alphathorn's lips pressed thin. You would drag us into old laws you abandoned long ago. I abandoned politics, Kaelin replied, not law. The ring burned cold against Selene's skin. Trials, challenges, dueling law. Her fate was sliding out of private rooms and into open ground. Kaelin's eyes found hers again, serious and unyielding. I will fight for the right for you to choose, he said, nothing more, nothing less. Selene drew a slow breath. Fire, pine, iron, storm, all of it pressed into her senses. For the first time that night, the ground beneath her feet felt solid. The hall did not return to its earlier noise. The feast continued, because it had to. Servants kept moving, cups were refilled, the fire was stoked. But conversation stayed tight and low, clustered in corners like wary animals. Celine stood apart from the tables now, near one of the smaller antechambers that opened off the great hall. The stone beneath her boots was colder here, less worn by years of bodies. She welcomed it. The chill crept up through the soles and steadied her. Her hand ached. The ring wasn't cutting her skin, but it might as well have been. Every time she became aware of it again, it was like someone pressing a thumb into a bruise, dull, constant, impossible to ignore. Across the room, Alpha Thorn spoke in tight murmurs with two elders. Ronan stood with his back partially turned, posture closed, his attention pulled elsewhere, but his awareness unmistakably fixed on her position. Not protective, strategic. Kaelin had been escorted from the hall, not expelled, not welcomed either, but given a guarded room near the western tower, an acknowledgement of rank if not invitation. The storm scent still lingered. It had worked its way into her clothes, her hair, her lungs. Each breath pulled it deeper, rain and cedar threaded with something that felt like solidity. The bond hadn't quieted. It hadn't surged either. It waited. Celine folded her arms tightly across her middle and pressed her shoulder blades back against the wall. Stone met her through wool and skin, solid and unyielding. Her wolf stayed alert under her ribs, not pacing now, but watching. Lena appeared beside her, close enough that their sleeves brushed. "They're calling the elders to the council room," Lena murmured. "All of them, Thornridge included." Celine nodded. "So it's begun." Lena hesitated. Her fingers hovered, then closed lightly around Celine's forearm. The warmth of her touch was familiar, grounding. "Are you all right?" "No," Celine said honestly. "But I'm clear." That earned her a shaky smile. They stood together until Alpha Thorn turned and caught Celine's eye. He lifted his chin, the smallest motion. A summons. Celine pushed off the wall and moved forward. The council room was older than the rest of the keep, circular, carved directly from the mountain stone, with a domed ceiling blackened by centuries of smoke. The air inside smelled of old ash, leather bindings, and something metallic that had seeped into the rock itself. Blood, she thought. Oath blood. The elders took their places around the stone table set into the center of the room. Each chair bore carved sigils marking pack lineage. Alpha Thorn sat at the head. Ronan claimed the seat to his right without waiting to be offered. Kaelin entered last. He moved with the same contained authority she'd seen in the hall, but here, within the bones of old law, there was a gravity to him that pulled attention whether he wanted it or not. He stopped opposite Ronan, hands resting loosely at his sides, boots planted on stone that had known more than one duel. Celine was guided to stand behind her father's chair. She hated that position. Passive, observed. Her fingers curled and uncurled at her sides, the ring catching faint candlelight. Alpha Thorn spoke first. "Stormfall's Alpha invokes challenge under ancestral law." "That is correct," Kaelin said. "You have refused alliance for 2 decades, an elder growled from the left. "Why raise old statutes now?" "Because old statutes exist for moments like this," Kaelin replied, "when power overreaches choice." Ronan leaned back slightly. His voice was calm, sharp-edged. Choice was never promised to her. Celine stiffened. "She is not a bargaining token," Kaelin said, turning his head just enough to meet Ronan's gaze. "She is a bound wolf." "To whom?" Ronan countered. "You? Because she has not accepted you. Because she wears my ring." Kaelin's eyes flicked, brief and precise, to Celine's hand. Not demand. Recognition. Kaelin's eyes flicked, brief and precise, to Celine's hand. Not demand. Recognition. "The bond exists regardless of ceremony," Kaelin said. "Our oldest laws were built around that fact." An elder tapped gnarled fingers against the stone. "And what exactly are you invoking, Stormfall?" Kaelin took a breath. Celine felt it, felt the shift of air, the tightening of intention, the way his focus settled like weight. "Trial of right," he said, "and if required, trial of command." The room went still. Ronan's jaw tightened. "You would contest Alphathorn's authority over his own blood?" "I would contest any alpha who binds a true mate against her will," Kaelin said evenly. "Even myself." That landed differently. Celine felt it in the subtle intake of breath around the circle, in the way her father's shoulders shifted. Alphathorn didn't speak immediately. When he did, his voice was measured. Trial of right grants her the ability to refuse a false bond, but only if the bond is proven. Ronan gave a cold smile. "And proving that will not be easy." Kaelin nodded once. "No, it won't." An elder turned to Celine at last. "Child, step forward." Her boots sounded too loud on the stone as she moved into the open center of the circle. Heat climbed her spine, then settled. She stopped beneath the domed ceiling, feeling very small and very seen. "Do you deny the bond with Stormfall's alpha?" the elder asked. Celine held her chin level. "I cannot." Ronan's eyes sharpened. "And do you accept it?" another elder pressed. Celine's breath caught, just briefly. Then she answered, clear and unembellished. "I have not been given the freedom to decide." That murmur again, not loud, but deep. Alphathorn closed his eyes for a moment. Ronan leaned forward. "This is wordplay. She stands here wearing my claim. She has not attempted to reject it." Celine turned toward him at once. Because rejection under duress is not rejection. It is survival. Her voice rang off the stone. Kaelin didn't move, didn't interrupt. That restraint mattered more than anything else he could have done. The eldest council member, bent and sharp-eyed, nodded slowly. "Then the trial of right will proceed." Ronan scoffed. "And if she fails?" "Then the betrothal stands," the elder said, "and Stormfall's alpha forfeits all claims." Kaelin accepted this without comment. Celine's stomach twisted. The trial began at dawn. Sleep was impossible. Celine lay on a narrow cot in a guest chamber she had used a dozen times before. The room smelled of cold linen and burned tallow, familiar and suddenly foreign. Every sound carried, the murmur of voices through stone, the crack of ice shifting outside, the distant howl of wind. She stared at the ceiling until her eyes burned. The bond pulsed in her chest like a second heart, not demanding, not aching, waiting. A knock came at her door, quiet but deliberate. She rose and opened it without asking. Kaelin stood in the corridor torchlight. His hair was loose now, falling against the collar of his tunic. Without cloak or armor, he seemed no less solid, just closer. "I won't come in," he said. The respect in that tightened something low in her chest. "Good," she replied. "I don't think I could handle another audience." He nodded. Silence stretched between them, not awkward, just full. "I needed to say this before morning," he said. "The trial of right will push you, not physically. It looks for instinct, reaction, truth." "I'm not afraid of truth," she said. "No," he agreed. "You're afraid of consequence," she exhaled. "Yes." He shifted his weight, boots scuffing softly against stone. "If you say no tomorrow, to me, to the bond, I will step back." She studied his face, searching for something possessive. Found none. "And if I say yes," she asked quietly, "then I will still not touch what isn't freely given," he replied. "The law may recognize it before you're ready. I won't." That was when something settled. Not desire, not longing, trust. She nodded once. "That's all I needed." He inclined his head and stepped away. The storm scent lingered long after he was gone. Dawn came pale and sharp. The trial grounds lay beyond the eastern ridge, where wind kept the snow thin and the stone bare. Wolves gathered in human form, wrapped in cloaks and furs, breath puffing white in the cold air. Celine stood between two elders at the center ring. Her gloves had been taken. The cold stone pressed into the soles of her boots, unforgiving. Ronan watched from the opposite side, expression unreadable. Kaelin stood alone. The trial of right was not a test of strength. It was a test of pull. They circled Celine with herbs burned low in iron bowls. Bitter smoke mingled with frost and sweat. Symbols were scratched into the stone with chalk and ash. "Stand still," an elder instructed. She did. Ronan was approached first. He stepped close enough that Celine could smell the pine and steel of his pack, could feel the ambient heat of his body in the cold air. He reached for her hand. Her body did nothing. No surge, no recoil. Her wolf stayed neutral, alert but unmoved. The ring sat cold and inert. The elders noted it. Ronan withdrew, jaw tight. Kaelin approached next. He stopped a full pace away. The cold sharpened. The air thinned, like the moment before lightning strikes. Celine's breath stalled in her chest as something inside her aligned with brutal clarity. The bond locked. Heat burst outward from her core, fast and controlled, flooding her limbs. Her spine snapped straight. Her heartbeat dropped into a heavy, deliberate rhythm. Her wolf surged, fully awake. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the gathered pack. Selene blinked, and the world fractured into sharp edges and heightened detail. Stone lines burned brighter. Scent thickened. Sound sharpened. Her vision reflected back at her from the polished edge of an elder's blade. Her eyes had gone fully gold, not flickering, not fighting, claimed by the bond itself. The murmur broke into open shock. A full bond response, an elder breathed. Across from her, Kaelin went utterly still. Then his breath left him in a single, controlled exhale. The storm scent hit hard. Rain, cold wind, power pressing outward. His posture shifted without thought, feet grounding, shoulders squaring, and his eyes changed. The gray darkened, then flared, deep, molten amber, sharp and unmistakable. Not wild, not lost, dominant recognition. Several wolves stepped back instinctively. A few dropped their gaze. Kaelin did not move closer, did not reach for her. But the bond snapped taut between them, visible in the way the air itself seemed to lean inward. The eldest elder swallowed. "Two-sided confirmation," he said quietly. "Rare, undeniable." "That is enough," another agreed. "The bond stands proven." Kaelin held Celine's gaze, steady, unclaiming, waiting. Ronan took a sharp step forward. "Then we moved to command." No one looked surprised. The trial of command was older, bloodier. Celine's nails dug into her palms. Alpha Thorn stepped into the ring at last. "If this proceeds, it proceeds by challenge." Ronan straightened. "Agreed." Kaelin nodded once. The ground was cleared, cloaks removed, weapons discarded. This would be alpha against alpha, governed by dominance and control, not death. Celine forced herself to watch. The moment they faced each other, the air changed. Ronan moved first, fast, aggressive, forcing Kaelin back with sheer momentum. Kaelin absorbed it, redirected, grounded himself with balance instead of brute force. Their bodies collided. Breath burst from lungs. Boots scraped stone. Celine smelled blood when Ronan struck hard enough to split skin at Kaelin's brow. Kaelin didn't snarl. He didn't rush. He waited. When he countered, it was with precision, gripping Ronan's arm, twisting just enough to overextend, forcing weight against weight. Ronan broke free, panting, anger flaring in his scent now. Kaelin spoke only once during the fight. "Yield." Ronan spat blood and lunged. The final exchange was brutal and swift. Kaelin grounded him, one knee to the stone, forearm pressed across Ronan's chest, not crushing, but immovable. The silence rang. "Yield," Kaelin said again. "She's not yours." Ronan's breath came ragged. Then, slowly, he nodded. The elders stepped in at once. The decision was made. Celine's knees nearly gave out. As the crowd began to break apart, Alpha Thorn approached her. His face looked older than it had the night before. "I should have trusted you," he said quietly. She nodded. "I know." Ronan passed her without a word. The ring felt heavier with every step he took away. Kaelin stopped a few feet from her. He didn't touch her. He waited. Celine looked down at the silver band on her finger. Then, with steady hands, she pulled it free. The cold vanished with it. She looked up. "I'm choosing," she said. Kaelin bowed his head. Not triumph, recognition. The storm finally broke. The elders did not speak at once. Tradition demanded space after a choice was made, time for the law to settle into the ground it had just reshaped. Wolves shifted on the trial grounds, breath still fogging in the cold morning air. The ridge wind carried the sharp scent of frost and iron and something newly broken open. Celine stood where she was, the space at her left side warm despite the wind. The bond had eased. Not faded, never that, but loosened enough to let her breathe fully for the first time since Ronan's ring had touched her skin. Her eyes cooled from molten gold back toward their natural shade. Though the world still felt sharper than it had the day before, colors carried weight, sound traveled farther. Her wolf did not retreat. It settled. Kaelin turned slightly, angling his body so he stood beside her without crowding. Close enough that she felt the heat of him through the winter air. Far enough that she remained unmistakably her own. The cut at his brow had begun to stiffen. Dry blood darkened against his skin, metallic and sharp in her nose. Without thinking, Celine reached for a linen scrap from the pocket at her hip. She paused. He looked down at her hand, then up at her face. A question. She nodded once. He lowered his head just enough for her to reach. Her fingers brushed his temple, careful, steady. The contact was simple, skin, warmth, pressure. The bond thrummed beneath her skin. She wiped the edge of blood away, then pressed the cloth lightly until it stopped weeping. Kaelin exhaled through his nose, slow, controlled. That breath settled something deeper than words. Behind them, Alpha Thorn cleared his throat. "The bond is recognized," he said, voice carrying across the grounds. "The betrothal is dissolved, by law, by witness, and by challenge." The words rang clean. Ronan stood a short distance away with his pack, shoulders squared, posture rigid. His scent had shifted, no longer aggressive, now edged with calculation and withdrawal. He did not look at Celine again. When he finally turned, his wolves followed without comment. No farewell, no protest. It was done. The elders began to disperse, speaking quietly among themselves, already turning their thoughts toward the political reckoning that would follow. Old laws had been invoked. New alliances would need to be reforged carefully. Lena broke free from the cluster near the ridge and rushed forward, stopping just short of colliding with Celine. She pulled her into a tight, fierce embrace, smelling of cold wool and relief. "You did it," she breathed. Celine returned the embrace briefly. "We did." Lena's eyes flicked to Kaelin, then back. She smiled, small, approving, and stepped away without comment. Celine faced her father again. Alpha Thorn looked worn, not weak, never that, but quieter, as if something rigid in him had finally given way. He studied Celine with the careful attention of an alpha and the unguarded concern of a father. "You should not have borne that alone," he said. "No," Selina replied, "but I was ready." His eyes softened. He inclined his head to Kaelin, formal and exact. "Stormfall's alpha. My daughter chose freely." "She did," Kaelin answered, "and I honored that." A pause stretched between them. "You'll remain," Thorn said, not a question. "For as long as I'm welcome," Kaelin replied. Thorn nodded once. "Stormfall will be welcome here. There is much to repair." Celine felt the shift immediately, the subtle realignment of power, recognition moving like a tide through those watching. Not celebration, acceptance. The trial grounds slowly emptied. Wolves returned to their duties, already reshaping the day around what had changed. The sun climbed higher, pale and cold, glinting off stone worn smooth by generations who had stood where Celine had just stood. When the last of the elders departed, Celine found herself standing with Kaelin alone near the edge of the ridge. The wind had gentled. Snow crunched faintly beneath their boots. Neither spoke for a long moment. "I meant it," Celine said at last. "What I said." Kaelin didn't turn toward her yet. He faced the horizon, where the land fell away into forest and low cloud. "I know." She studied him, not with wonder, not with doubt, with consideration. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," he said, "nothing is required." That answer surprised her. He turned then, meeting her gaze fully. The amber of earlier was gone from his eyes, but the steadiness remained. "There will be time," he continued, "for recognition, for standing, for things that follow bonds." His voice stayed level. "But none of it needs to happen because law demands it." Celine let out a slow breath. The air filled her chest, clean and cold. "That matters," she said. "It should," Kaelin replied. She looked down at her bare hand where the ring had been. Pale skin, faint pressure marks already fading. Her fingers curled once. Then she reached out, this time without pause. She took his hand. The contact was solid, grounded, warm. Her palm fit against his without effort, and the bond answered, not flaring, not consuming, just settling deeper into place, like something finally allowed to rest. Kaelin's thumb brushed once, deliberate and light, over the inside of her wrist. Not a claim, a promise of patience. Celine looked up at him. Her voice was steady when she spoke. "This is mine," she said. "My choice." Kaelin inclined his head. "Then I accept it, on your terms." They stood together at the edge of the ridge, hands joined, the storm finally spent. What remained was not noise or spectacle, it was certainty. The keep did not erupt into celebration. It adjusted. That was how power truly shifted, quietly, inevitably. Wolves moved with new certainty. Voices carried less edge. Eyes followed Celine differently now, not with curiosity or calculation, but recognition. She felt it everywhere, in the way doors opened without hesitation, in the way conversations paused when she passed, then resumed with acceptance, in the absence of Ronan's presence, like a pressure that had finally lifted. By evening, the storm clouds gathered again over the western ridge. Celine found Kaelin where the stone path narrowed near the old watch platform overlooking the forest. Wind tugged at her cloak, threading cold through wool. The air smelled sharp, snow coming, iron-rich rock, pine far below. And him. The storm scent hit her fully now, no longer restrained. Rain and cedar and heat pressed into her senses, curling low and insistent. The bond tightened, not painful, not overwhelming, hungry. Kaelin stood with his back to the keep, arms relaxed at his sides. He turned as she approached, eyes already darkened, amber glinting where gray had been. Not flaring like during the trial. Focused. "You're pacing," he said. "I needed air," she replied. "And you." That earned her a slow, intent look. She stopped in front of him, close enough now that the heat of his body cut through the cold. The space between them felt charged, tight with everything they hadn't allowed themselves yet. "You stood back," she said, quietly. All day. Yes. You don't have to anymore. His jaw flexed. Say it plainly. She stepped closer. The bond surged, hot and unmistakable, rolling through her chest and down into her limbs. Her breath deepened. Her wolf pressed forward, no longer just alert, but awake and demanding. I want you, Selene said. I've chosen, and I'm done waiting. Kalen moved then. One step, solid, unavoidable. His hand closed around her wrist, not pulling, not trapping, anchoring. The contact sent heat skidding up her arm, sharp and grounding all at once. His other hand settled at her lower back, fingers spreading through fabric, firm enough to be unmistakable. Her pulse leapt. You're certain, he said, voice low and rough now, because I won't stop once I answer this. Selene lifted her chin. Good. That was all it took. Kalen's mouth came down on hers with intent, not tentative, not reverent, claiming without force. His lips were warm, firm, demanding her response instead of stealing it. She gave it willingly. Her hands fisted in his tunic as the kiss deepened, breath breaking, the bond flaring hot and fast between them. Storm and heat and the clean edge of winter wrapped around her, filling her senses until nothing else existed. His thumb pressed under her chin, tilting her mouth exactly where he wanted it. She met him without hesitation, matching pressure for pressure, fire answering fire. When they finally broke apart, her breath came uneven. His eyes burned amber, locked on her face like he was memorizing it. Mine, he said, not as a claim, but a truth. Selene's smile was slow and fierce. She reached up, dragging her thumb across his lower lip, feeling the heat there, the promise. And you're mine, she answered, by choice. Kalen rested his forehead against hers again, breathing her in like he needed it to steady himself. His grip tightened once at her waist, possessive now, unapologetic. Below them, thunder rolled. Selene leaned into him, body fitting easily against his, the bond no longer waiting, no longer restrained. It had found its end, not in law, not in challenge, but in fire, teeth, breath, and a kiss that left no doubt who she had chosen, and who would never let her go.